What if the story you tell yourself about your past, like the exact narrative you use to explain why you feel stuck or, why you hold on to certain fears, is actually just a fiction?
Right, a complete fabrication.
Yeah, exactly. And the research from Dr. Joe Dispenza presents this statistic that it forces a total reevaluation of how we view our own lives.
hmm
He says that 50% of the stories we tell about our past aren't even the truth.
It's staggering. 50%.
No, right. We are unconsciously rewriting our own history.
Right.
We fabricate details, we exaggerate slights, and we invent these entire emotional landscapes just to justify why we haven't changed since some specific event.
We literally make things up.
We do. We have people walking around living these miserable lives that they never actually experience in the way they remember, purely to excuse themselves from stepping into the unknown. So, okay, let's unpack this.
It's a deeply unsettling premise, because it attacks the very foundation of our perceived identity.
Yeah, totally. It pulls the rug right out from under you.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how the brain actually operates. To understand why we do this, we have to look at predictive coding theory. Basically, at its core, the human brain is a prediction machine.
Okay, a prediction machine. How so?
Well, its primary evolutionary directive is survival, right? And it achieves that by constantly forecasting what is going to happen in the next millisecond, the next hour, the next day.
It's always trying to stay one step ahead.
Exactly. But the brain operates in a dark, silent box, the skull. It can't actually see or hear anything directly.
That's such a weird way to think about it, but it's true.
Right, so it relies entirely on historical data to make those predictions. It's constantly referencing past experiences to map out future probabilities. So when you try to change a habit or step into a new environment.
Or even just try to feel differently, right?
Wow.
Adopt a new emotional baseline.
Yes, exactly. When you do that, you are dragging the brain out of its historical data set. You're forcing it into the absolute unknown.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, I mean, the unknown is synonymous with danger.
Oh, 100%.
Like, if our ancestors stepped into an unknown patch of jungle, there was a very high probability something might just eat them.
Right, you didn't want to be adventurous back then.
Exactly. So the primitive brain, it interprets a new emotional state, not as, personal growth, but as a literal threat to your survival.
Precisely. The brain calculates the metabolic cost and the risk of that unknown, and it just panics. It strongly prefers the familiar.
Even if the familiar is awful.
Even if it's chronic anxiety or depression.
It points to an exaggerated memory of a failure and says, look how dangerous it was last time we tried something new. We have to stay here in this familiar misery.
Exactly. It convinces you that you're keeping yourself safe.
That completely reframes self-sabotage for me. It's not just a lack of willpower, It's this hyperactive, deeply misguided survival mechanism.
Biology, yeah.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore exactly how this mechanism works, how the brain and body become biologically addicted to the past, and most importantly, how you can actually rewrite that biology to become a new person.
Which is the really exciting part.
Definitely. But to understand how a past event becomes a biological trap, we really need to map the anatomy of a memory. Like, how does an experience actually lodge itself into the tissue of the brain?
Well, helps to visualize it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and it feels a bit like a camera flash in a dark room.
That's a great way to look at it.
Like, you're just going about your baseline day, and suddenly a shocking event occurs. A betrayal, a car accident, a sudden loss.
Right, something highly emotionally charged.
Exactly. And in that fraction of a second, your internal chemistry wildly alters. The brain detects this massive shift in the body's internal environment and essentially freezes a frame.
It takes a snapshot.
Right. It captures the sensory data of the external world who is in the room, the temperature, the smell, the sound, and binds it to that intense internal chemical state. That flash of binding is the literal birth of a long-term memory.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the neurochemistry of what we call synaptic plasticity.
Synaptic plasticity. Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So when that flash happens, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, flags all that sensory information as highly significant.
It's like it slaps a big red urgent sticker on it.
Exactly. And then it sends an influx of this neurotransmitter called glutamate right into the hippocampus.
And the hippocampus is where we store memories, right?
Yes, it's the region responsible for forming new autobiographical memories. This massive chemical surge of glutamate causes neurons to form dense physical connections.
So the environment and the internal emotional state become permanently wired together.
Permanently. But the crucial principle here, and this is what Dispenza emphasizes, is that the resulting emotion is purely a chemical residue.
A chemical residue.
Yes. Feelings and emotions are simply the end products of past experiences. We remember those events so vividly, not because of the factual data of what happened, but because of the highly charged chemical state they produced.
Okay, but I need to push back on the implication here just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
If we are saying that living in these emotions means we're tethering our consciousness to the past, how does that account for, like, real physical memory?
What do you mean?
Well, if I burn my hand on a hot stove, my subsequent fear of the stove isn't some ghost I'm tethered to, right? It's a highly functional survival tactic.
Right, of course.
So where's the line between a healthy, adaptive survival memory and this toxic tethering to the past that we're warning about?
That's the critical distinction to make here. A healthy survival memory allows you to extract the wisdom of the event without needing to re-experience the physiological terror.
Oh, I see.
Remember, the stove is hot, so you don't touch it. But your heart doesn't start pounding out of your chest, and your palms don't start sweating every single time you walk into a kitchen.
Right, I'm not having a panic attack just looking at an oven.
Exactly. Toxic tethering occurs when the memory cannot be decoupled from the autonomic nervous system response.
When they're fused together.
Right, when the factual memory of the event and the chemical trauma of the event remain completely fused. Thinking about the event causes your body to literally relive the chemical cascade.
So if I'm waking up every morning feeling profound guilt or unworthiness or just this chronic anxiety based on past events, I'm literally not living in the present.
You aren't. If you cannot think greater than how you feel, or if your feelings have become your primary means of thinking, you are entirely trapped in the past.
Wow. In that state, every decision you make right now, in the present, is being filtered through the neurochemical lens of an event that ended years ago.
Exactly. You're wearing glasses tinted by a trauma from 1998, trying to navigate 2026.
That fundamentally changes how we should look at chronic stress. I mean, it's not just a bad mood, it's a literal physical state of temporal displacement.
It really is.
It explains why it's so utterly useless to just tell someone to snap out of it or move on.
Oh, the worst advice ever. You are basically asking them to ignore their own physiology.
Right. And that brings us to the actual mechanism of the trap. Like, why is it so stubborn? According to this deep dive source material, the answer lies in the objective nature of the body.
Yes, the body is totally objective.
Right. It's an incredible biological machine, but it completely lacks the ability to differentiate between a real-life external threat and an internal psychological threat.
It is entirely literal. It doesn't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the HPA axis. That's the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands.
Okay, the HPA axis, what does that do?
This is the system that governs your stress response. If a predator jumps out at you, the HPA axis instantly floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline.
The classic fight-or-flight response.
Exactly. Your pupils dilate, blood moves away from your digestive organs and into your extremities so you can fight or run away. This is an acute, sympathetic nervous system response.
And it's designed to last for a very short duration, right?
Very short.
Because, I mean, if you're still running from the tiger 2 hours later, you're probably already dead.
Exactly. It's a sprint, not a marathon.
Yeah.
But let's look at the modern psychological equivalent. Say an external event happens, maybe a brutal argument with your boss.
Okay, yeah.
The event happens and it passes. But a week later, you are sitting safely in your living room and you begin to ruminate on that argument.
Oh, I do this all the time.
We all do.
Yeah.
You picture the face they made, you remember the exact words they said, and guess what?
Yeah.
Your brain fires the exact same neurological circuits that were active during the actual argument.
And because the body is objective.
Right. It cannot look around the living room and say, wait, we're safe on the couch. There's no boss here.
Mm-hmm.
It simply receives the neurological signal from the brain and activates the HPA axis all over again.
Wow. So if I replay that argument in my head in the shower at 8 a.m., and then again while I'm stuck in traffic at 5 p.m., and then again while I'm staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m.
You're dumping those exact same survival chemicals into your bloodstream over and over again.
I am commanding my body to mobilize for a physical fight multiple times a day, purely through thought alone. That is insane.
And that cumulative biological toll is devastating. You might be emotionally reliving that single event 50 to 100 times in a single day.
50 to 100 times.
Your body believes it is living in that past traumatic event 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Your brain is signaling to your body that it is under continuous, relentless attack.
And this introduces that fascinating communication loop, right? Via interoception.
Yes, interoception, which is basically the brain's perception of the body's internal state. Think of it this way. Thoughts are the language of the brain, but feelings are the language of the body.
Okay. Thoughts are the brain, feelings are the body. I like that.
So you have a thought about the past, which generates a feeling in the body. The brain, via the vagus nerve, is constantly monitoring the body.
It's always checking in.
Right.
Mm.
It detects this flood of stress chemicals, concludes that a threat must be present because the body is mobilized, and so what does it do?
It generates more anxious thoughts to match the anxious feeling.
Exactly. It's a closed-loop system.
It's like self-inflicted chemical warfare.
That's exactly what it is. And over time, this constant stimulus and response loop subconsciously conditions the body to literally become the mind.
The body becomes the mind. That is a heavy concept.
It is. It means the physical tissue has memorized the emotional state so thoroughly that it no longer requires the brain to consciously initiate the thought.
Wait, really? The body just does it on its own?
Yes. The body wakes up, craves the familiar chemistry of anxiety or anger because it has actually downregulated its receptors to adapt to that high baseline.
So it demands its chemical fix.
That is the literal biological definition of an addiction.
Wow. And that completely hijacks our everyday life, starting with our morning routines. Dispenza outlines what happens in those first few moments of waking up.
Oh, this part is so relatable it hurts.
Right. The sleep cycle ends, your eyes open, and for a fraction of a second, you are in this transitional brainwave state. You are essentially a blank slate.
A brief moment of peace.
But almost immediately, the default mode network kicks in. That's the network of interacting brain regions that light up when the mind is wandering or remembering the past.
Yep.
And instantly, you start thinking about your problems, the emails you have to send, the mortgage, a health issue, that estranged relative.
And each of those problems is a memory.
Right. And each memory is tied to a specific, usually negative emotional signature.
So before your feet even touch the floor, you have rebooted the entire chemical architecture of your past.
You are instantly engulfed in the familiar feelings of unhappiness or anxiety before you've even brushed your teeth.
You're already living in the past.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And, we typically define habits as behavioral tics like biting our nails or drinking too much caffeine.
Sure, surface level stuff.
But Dispenza elevates the definition of a habit to something much more profound. He defines it as a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions acquired through repetition.
Yes.
It's when your body has done something so many times that it knows how to do it better than your conscious mind.
And when the body knows how to do it better than the conscious mind, you have effectively lost your free will to a biological program.
So what does this all mean?
It means you are running on autopilot.
You're just a passenger.
Exactly. You drive to work the exact same way, you see the same people who push the exact same emotional buttons, and you react in the exact same predictable ways.
Your entire future becomes nothing more than a linear projection of your familiar past.
Precisely. And this deeply informs how people construct their identities. Like when people are asked why they are bitter or why they have trust issues, they almost inevitably point to an event from decades ago.
They build their whole narrative around that one betrayal.
Right. They anchor their identity to it.
But listening to the neurobiology we just discussed, what they're really saying underneath that narrative is, since that specific chemical flashpoint 30 years ago, I haven't been able to alter my internal biological state.
That's exactly it. They're saying, since that event, I haven't been able to change.
Yeah.
They are identifying as the chemical residue of the event.
And this creates a massive vulnerability, like a huge societal trap. Because living in a chronic state of sympathetic arousal, constantly flooded with cortisol, is agonizing.
It's exhausting.
It is. But because most people lack the internal mechanisms to downregulate their own nervous systems, they become entirely dependent on the outer world to change how they feel inside.
It creates a culture of chronic dependency. If you have an underlying baseline of anxiety and you don't know how to change your brainwaves naturally, you will naturally seek an external disruptor.
Like binging Netflix.
Exactly. You binge a television show to force the brain to stop ruminating. You endlessly scroll social media to generate these little micro hits of dopamine, which temporarily mask the cortisol.
Or you consume alcohol or drugs to artificially suppress the central nervous system.
Right. These are all just attempts to forcibly alter a painful internal chemical state using external means. Dispenza actually characterizes this as a form of societal hypnosis.
Hypnosis.
Yeah, we are conditioned to believe the locus of control is entirely outside of us. We need a pill, a screen, a drink to make the bad feeling go away.
But it's just treating a bullet wound with a Band-Aid. The second the dopamine hit fades, or the screen goes dark, or the substance wears off, the underlying biological baseline is still there,
The body is still the mind of that past trauma.
and the anxiety comes rushing back in. So the ultimate question is, how do we get out? How do we break the loop? If our brain is functioning as a hard drive of the past, and our body is addicted to the chemistry of trauma, how do we actually intervene?
And this is where the research presents an incredibly provocative, highly disruptive stance. It goes completely against conventional wisdom.
It really does. Dispenza argues adamantly against the traditional model of going back and processing the past. He says you will never hear him say to go back and process it.
It is highly controversial,
Yeah.
especially within the context of traditional psychoanalysis and talk therapy.
Right, because those operate on the premise that we must excavate the past, analyze the timeline of events, and understand the motives of our abusers just to heal.
Exactly.
I found myself naturally resisting this idea when I was reading the material. Like, wait, aren't we supposed to analyze our problems to fix them? I kept thinking about exposure therapy. Isn't there immense value in analyzing the threads of a psychological knot?
It's a fair question. But the problem with analytical processing, specifically for individuals stuck in these profound physiological loops, is something called state-dependent recall.
State-dependent recall, okay.
When you sit down to analyze your trauma, the very act of recalling it often triggers that exact HPA axis we discussed earlier.
So your body starts flooding with stress hormones just by talking about it.
Yes. And if you attempt to intellectually analyze a problem while your body is actively marinated in the chemistry of fear or anger, you are actually reinforcing the neural pathways.
Oh, wow. Because of Hebb's law?
Exactly, Hebb's law.
Yeah.
Neurons that fire together wire together. By analyzing the trauma while feeling the emotion of the trauma, you are firing and wiring those circuits even tighter.
So you aren't healing, you are literally just practicing the feeling of the trauma.
You drive the brain further out of balance by over-arousing it. And the trauma is no longer just in the brain. You anchor it even deeper into the tissue of the body.
So trying to solve an emotional problem while in the physiological state of that problem is totally counterproductive. It's like trying to rebuild an engine while the car is still hurtling down the highway at 80 miles an hour.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And this brings us into the realm of hard neuroscience, specifically regarding brainwaves.
Yes, the brainwaves. I was looking into the role of beta brainwaves, and it seems like they act as the brain's critical firewall.
They do.
Is this why we cannot change our identity or heal while we are in our normal, waking, analytical state?
That is precisely the mechanical barrier.
Yeah.
So brainwaves are measured in hertz, which represents the cycles per second of electrical activity. Right now, as we converse, as we analyze and process the environment, we are in a beta brainwave state.
Okay, so normal waking consciousness is beta.
Right, and beta is highly adaptive.
Hmm.
It allows us to focus on the external world, be aware of our physical bodies, and track the passage of time.
Essential for getting through the day.
Absolutely. When you are in beta, your neocortex, which is the evolutionarily newest part of the brain, the part that plugs us into 3D reality, is highly active.
Okay.
The neocortex processes sensory perception, spatial reasoning, conscious thought. But crucially, it is the storage center for explicit autobiographical memories. It is the repository of your known past.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let me make sure the logical bridge is clear here.
Go for it.
If the neocortex is the physical hard drive where my identity, my past traumas, and my entire sense of self are stored, and beta brainwaves are the operating system required to access that hard drive,
Yes.
then attempting to change my core personality while remaining in beta is a neurological impossibility.
Exactly. You are trying to overwrite the operating system while the operating system is actively running the defense protocols.
You cannot reprogram the brain while operating in the exact frequency that houses the problem.
You are locked into the predictable fusion of the familiar past. As long as your attention is focused outward on your environment, downward on your body's sensations, and linearly on time, which is what beta forces you to do, you cannot access the deeper subconscious operating system where true change occurs.
So what do we do?
To actually alter the programming, you have to bypass the analytical mind. You have to slow your brainwaves down from beta through alpha and ideally into theta.
Alpha and theta.
Yes. You have to decouple your consciousness from your body, your environment, and time. You have to get beyond them and enter the present moment, which, to the predictive brain, is complete void of the unknown.
But if we fail to bypass that beta state, right, if we just keep running the same stressful programs,
Hmm.
the biological consequences are terrifying.
It really are.
It's not just a matter of feeling bad, it's a matter of actual physical degradation. The research dives deep into epigenetics here.
Epigenetics is key.
Let's look at the actual mechanism. I was trying to conceptualize how a thought turns into a physical illness, and the metaphor of a factory in a wartime supply crisis came to mind.
Okay, I like where this is going.
If you are constantly checking in with your body and recognizing misery or fear, your brain keeps signaling danger. The body thinks it's at war.
Right.
So the cellular factories that build our bodies start cutting corners because they think they need to conserve resources for an impending physical battle.
That is an excellent way to understand the epigenetic mechanism. So epigenetics is the study of how behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work.
Right, it's not changing the DNA itself, just how it's read.
Exactly. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence. But they dictate how your body reads that blueprint. When your internal environment is flooded with stress hormones, those chemicals interact with the outer membrane of your cells. They send signals into the nucleus, which alters gene expression, often through a process called methylation. The chronic stress signals cause the cell to downregulate certain genes, particularly the ones responsible for growth, repair, and immune function.
Because if you're running from a tiger, your body doesn't care about digesting breakfast or repairing a micro tear in your muscle. It only cares about immediate survival.
Exactly.
But if you're in that state for 30 years because you're angry at your ex-spouse, your body hasn't been properly repairing itself for 30 years.
Precisely. The blueprint of the DNA remains intact, but the translation of that blueprint becomes flawed. The body begins to manufacture what the research refers to as cheaper proteins.
Cheaper proteins, that sounds bad.
It is. Proteins are the fundamental building blocks of life. They govern the structure and function of every tissue and organ. When a cell in a chronic stress state manufactures a protein, it often misfolds or lacks the structural integrity of a protein generated in a normal state of homeostasis. Over time, the accumulation of these cheaper, degraded proteins leads to systemic breakdown, inflammation, and the literal creation of disease. The body literally breaks down.
So the resentment you're holding on to isn't just an emotional burden. It is an active epigenetic signal that is dismantling your physical health.
It is physically self-destructive.
That is a profound realization. So we have to pivot to the actual biological intervention. How do we physical stop the factory from producing cheaper proteins?
You have to step into the unknown.
Right. How do we bypass the beta brainwaves and signal to the body that it is finally safe? The intervention Dr. Dispenza focuses heavily on is trading those negative emotions for elevated ones.
Yes, gratitude, appreciation, love, kindness.
And combining that with a specific physiological state known as heart coherence.
Yeah.
But I want to make this clear. This isn't just some philosophical exercise of thinking happy thoughts, right?
Not at all.
There is a hard physiological bridge here involving the respiratory and nervous systems.
It is entirely physiological. When you are caught in a loop of frustration or anxiety, your autonomic nervous system is jagged and completely out of balance.
Right.
If we measure your heart rate variability, which is the time intervals between your heartbeats, we see a very erratic, incoherent pattern. The heart is essentially stuttering.
Like an engine misfiring.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a mechanism to manually override this system, and it's right under your nose, your breath.
Breathing.
By intentionally slowing down your breathing and particularly focusing on extending the exhale, you physically expand the diaphragm.
And what does that do?
This expansion stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the primary neural highway of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system.
Oh, wow. So the mechanical act of deep, deliberate breathing sends a physical impulse up the vagus nerve to the brainstem, forcing the parasympathetic system to engage.
Exactly. It's like hitting the manual brake on the stress response.
Okay, so we hit the brake.
Yes. And when you combine that physiological brake with a deliberate shift in attention-taking, taking your focus completely off your problems, and intentionally cultivating a feeling of deep gratitude or care, the rhythm of the heart profoundly changes.
It goes from stuttering to what?
It shifts into a smooth, rolling, coherent cadence. It becomes rhythmic. Now, the heart and the brain operate in a constant bidirectional feedback loop. But interestingly, the heart sends far more neurological signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart.
Wait, really? The heart talks to the brain more than the brain talks to the heart.
Yes. And when the heart enters this state of coherence, it generates an afferent signal, a sensory signal traveling from the body up to the brain that travels directly to the amygdala.
The threat detection center we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
So the regulated, coherent heart essentially bypasses all those anxious thoughts and speaks directly to the alarm system, telling it to stand down.
Precisely. The coherent heart sends a massive overriding neurological signal to the brain that says the environment is safe, the war is over.
The war is over.
And this signal causes the brain to release a completely different cascade of chemicals, oxytocin, DHEA, endorphins, which counteract the cortisol. It resets the baseline in the brain.
The heart literally telling the brain the past is over. It's an incredible biological breakthrough.
It's revolutionary.
And the clinical evidence presented in the material proves this isn't just for, low-level stress or daily annoyances. Dispenza details the demographics of the individuals utilizing this specific biological intervention, and it is staggering.
It really is.
We are talking about combat veterans, Navy SEALs, special ops, former prisoners of war, people who have endured extreme, unimaginable abuses,
Right.
individuals with nervous systems so deeply wired for trauma that they suffer from night terrors, panic attacks, chronic suicidal ideation, agoraphobia. These are not minor psychological hurdles. These are profound physiological injuries.
We are looking at the absolute extremes of sympathetic nervous system dysregulation.
Yeah.
Yet the biological pathway back to homeostasis remains identical for them. When these individuals are guided through the process of slowing their brainwaves into alpha or theta, uncoupling from their external environment, and intentionally driving their heart into coherence, the physiological release is violent in its intensity.
Violent in a good way, right?
Yes, a massive release. The case studies often feature patients describing the moment of breakthrough with intensely visceral physical language. They don't just say, "Oh, I felt a bit better."
What do they say?
They say things like, "It felt like my heart exploded in my chest," or "My heart physically blew wide open."
My heart blew wide open. You can almost visualize the neurological dam breaking.
Exactly. Decades of suppressed energy, locked in this rigid survival posture, suddenly flooding back into the system.
And the physiological cascade that follows is miraculous, though, as we've said, entirely grounded in biology. The moment that energetic release happens, the individual's consciousness is violently pulled out of the past and anchored firmly in the present moment.
The anxiety just dissipates.
The cyclic moods vanish. The chronic depression lifts. The body, which had been trapped in a state of emergency down-regulating genes and creating cheaper proteins, instantly receives the epigenetic signal to recalibrate.
It shifts all those resources back to the immune system, back to cellular repair. The body finally feels safe enough to heal itself. It is the ultimate return to natural biological order.
It's beautiful, and once the body is freed from the past like this, it forces a profound cognitive shift regarding the individual's life story.
Right. Once the autonomic nervous system is no longer screaming in terror every time a past event is recalled, how does the person relate to their own history?
Well, Dr. Dispenza provides what I think is the most potent definition of clinical healing I have ever encountered. He says, memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom.
It's a brilliant
I
definition.
want to let that sit for a second. Memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. It fundamentally alters the entire goal of healing.
It does. Because the objective is not to wipe your memory clean. You aren't being lobotomized.
Right. The factual data of the trauma, the who, what, where, and when, it remains safely stored in the hippocampus. But the amygdala is no longer chemically bound to it.
You possess the data without the physiological destruction.
And when individuals reach this state of wisdom, their retrospective view of their suffering transforms entirely. The case studies note that they don't look back at their brutal pasts with resentment or regret anymore.
No, they don't.
Instead, they view it from a vantage point of profound perspective. They say, I wouldn't change one thing because I needed to experience every single one of those hardships. They were the exact catalyst required to get me to this exact present moment.
It represents the complete cessation of victimhood. The individual becomes the conscious architect of their own timeline, rather than just the chemical casualty of their past.
It's incredibly empowering.
And, the source material briefly touches upon a deeper philosophical, perhaps even spiritual analysis of this transition.
Oh, right. The soul's journey.
Yes. It posits that the core essence of a person, their consciousness or soul, is fundamentally incapable of progressing to new phases of development or going on to the next adventure. if it remains stubbornly clinging to the past.
That makes sense. You can't move forward if you're chained to a wall behind you.
Exactly.
Hmm.
You cannot experience novel dimensions of existence,
Hmm.
form truly new relationships, or access higher states of being if your biological vehicle is entirely possessed by a previous chapter of your life.
If we synthesize all of this, it truly boils down to the mastery of attention.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have the familiar past, which is a known entity, but as we've established, it is often a known state of physiological misery.
Right.
And we have the predictable future, which the brain simply constructs by copy-pasting the familiar past forward in time. Both of these states are knowns. They are illusions generated by a survival-obsessed brain.
So where's the real change?
The only domain where genuine change, true epigenetic healing, and actual free will exist is in what the research beautifully terms the sweet spot of the generous present moment.
The generous present moment.
That sweet spot is the only coordinate in space and time where the body and mind are unshackled from historical conditioning. It is the void of the unknown.
And while we discussed how the unknown is biologically terrifying to the primitive brain, it is concurrently the only environment where a new biological reality can actually be synthesized.
Yes. To inhabit that generous present moment, one must be willing to endure the severe discomfort of biological withdrawal.
Because your body is going to crave that old chemistry.
Exactly. You have to endure your body craving its familiar baseline of anxiety and consciously, repeatedly, choose to breathe into heart coherence instead.
It's the ultimate act of biological rebellion against your own conditioning.
It really is.
We have covered an immense amount of complex territory today in this deep dive, bridging neuroscience, psychology, and epigenetics. But the core narrative you should walk away with is this. You are not a victim of your past.
That is a biological fact.
You are only a victim if you actively, albeit unconsciously, choose to keep your body chemically addicted to it. You possess the innate anatomical machinery, your breath, your vagus nerve, your heart, your frontal lobe, to regulate your brain waves, to achieve profound heart coherence, and to literally become a new person.
This isn't abstract self-help. It is applied mechanistic neuroscience.
Exactly.
And if we place this biological reality into the broader philosophical context touched upon by the text, the implications are just staggering. Most belief systems agree we are eternal beings, or at least that our conscious awareness persists in some form.
Right.
So if you view consciousness through the light of eternity, the time we spend torturing ourselves over finite past events is tragically wasteful. In the grand expanse of an eternal trajectory, the single moment you make up your mind to no longer be defined by your past matters infinitely.
It changes everything. By mastering your internal state, you liberate yourself, and inherently, you sever the emotional hold that any past trauma has over you. You reclaim all of that biological energy.
And you consolidate it in the present.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over or explore on your own, building on the mechanics we've dissected today.
Lay on them.
We started by examining how your predictive brain can literally fabricate 50% of your past, generating fake trauma to keep you paralyzed in your comfort zone. We explored the indisputable biological reality that your physical body is so objective, so literal, that it cannot distinguish between a genuine external threat and an emotion of fear fabricated entirely by thought alone.
Right. Your body physically manifests the reality of the chemistry you feed it.
So, Miss, what would happen to your neurobiology if, starting tomorrow morning, you hijacked that exact same evolutionary superpower and ran it in reverse?
Oh, that's interesting.
If your body fully believes a fabricated past trauma is real and downregulates your genes accordingly, wouldn't it also believe a fabricated future joy is real?
Biologically, it has to.
What if you actively, obsessively fabricated a feeling of profound, overwhelming gratitude for a beautiful future that hasn't even happened yet? If you can biologically poison yourself with fake memories, you can biologically heal yourself with fake futures. If you use your brain to signal the heart, and the heart signals the genes that the beautiful future is already here, who will you become?